Hey there. Happy Thursday. Jim McCotter live. Good to be with you guys today. Many people have asked, Jim, would you give your testimony? You've experienced so many different things over the years in business, starting churches on campuses in other countries all over the world. Um, and I thought about it, and I thought it was interesting when I read through the book of Acts to see how many times Paul gave his testimony. He certainly gave other talks than his testimony, but more than once he gave basically his testimony, and that's something great that all of us have, and every Christian has got a testimony. Everybody that's met Jesus Christ, you've got a testimony, and people can argue about creation, they can argue about the flood, they can argue about the Bible, but they can't argue when you said, like the blind man, when they were questioning him about Jesus in the Bible, he said, all I know is this: I once was blind, but now I see. Amazing grace, what saved a wretch like me. And nobody can refute that. There's no denying of that. And even my own personal explanation, I don't know how that could ever happen. I didn't have a natural inclination just to love others like I love myself, to put others before myself. None of that was or even still is natural. It's a supernatural work of God. And so when God comes in us and he gives us peace, he gives us assurance of eternal salvation and life now and forever, and your life changes, there's just no explanation other than I said yes to Jesus. And if any man is in Christ, he is a new creation. Old things are passed away, and behold, all things become new. And that's true with you if you know Christ. And nothing better than learning how to share your testimony. So I'm going to be sharing kind of my life story, and it's going to be over literally a period of many weeks, because I'm going to share experiences that I think will help you, and you'll relate to in many instances. But I know how to share my testimony in one sentence, many sentences, a 10-minute, 5 or 10 minute testimony, a 30-minute testimony, or an hour testimony, depending on your opportunity. When I see somebody, maybe a clerk in the grocery store, when I buy some groceries and I just have a second, give her a track. I say, look, I've written this. It tells how my life has been changed and how my life has been made new, or just a sentence like that. That's a testimony. Or I hand them this and I say, this has changed my life. That's a testimony. That's one word, but it's or one sentence, but it's a testimony. If you have more time, you can say more in 2 or 3 sentences, or you can share for a half hour, or you can literally share for hours, because you have a lot when you stop and think about it in your own testimony. So Monday, we talk about the nation and civil rule, and how Jesus is king and needs to rule every nation, including our nation, and how the civil rulers need to see their servants under God, to serve God and to carry out his law, not man's law, but to establish his law. Tuesday, we're looking at New Testament church, which is really the foundation. In fact, Paul said it's the pillar and support of the truth. And Jesus said, I'll build my church. This is what he's building, his group, his people. And we need to get back to the way it was in the New Testament. And on Wednesday, it's on marriage and family. We started on that this last Wednesday. If you didn't get in on that, the first of this series, the first one is the most important, because if it goes in order. If you don't get the first one, it's kind of like if you don't reach the first rung of a ladder, you'll never be able to reach the second rung of a ladder. So on marriage, husband, wife, sons, daughters, anything in connected with the family institution that God ordained, God's family plan. We gave it this last Wednesday. Today it's going to be Jim's life. That's me, my life, my testimony, why my life changed, the power of God, how he took me from darkness to life, from the devil's camp to God's camp. And so here we go. I was born, kind of started out a little bit early. I was born in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, believe it or not, and lived there until I was 4 years old before my family moved to Texas. But my dad, he uh, uh, he was, just to tell you a little bit about my upbringing, I was basically middle class type family. My father, he was an early barnstormer, as they called them, flying planes. He had a number of planes over the years that he flew when I was, even before I was born, but even as very young when we were in Milwaukee. And he flew for Pure Oil Company for years. In fact, he was in the air, he told us, more than he was on the ground. In those days, the Federal Aviation Committee or Association didn't ground you and require you to be only fly a minimum amount of hours. And so he literally was flying in the air, solo pilot, more than he was on the ground for many years. In fact, he stopped logging his hours after 20,000 hours. He flew over 20,000 hours before he stopped logging. So he doesn't really know how many hours he actually flew. In those years, he told us 13 crash landings. Daddy was brought up with his mother, who was single. His father died when he was 3 years old, and he went through the Depression, and he knew what it was like to be hungry. He said, if you've never experienced that, you don't know what that's like. It drove him to work hard and to make sure we kids would never go hungry. But when he was flying in those days, in the 30s, even in the 20s, I think he started in the 20s and 30s and into the 40s. Those years, the planes weren't too reliable. The engines a lot of times would stall or stop or not work. And so he came down over the many years, 13 different crash landings. He told me one, he was flying and the engine caught on fire in front and he had to go sideways, side slipping sideways, because if he went straight ahead, he would have burned up and the plane would have burned up. And so he was going sideways to get down. God protected him. I wasn't born yet. Had he crashed, of course, I wouldn't be here today. God is sovereign in how he works everything. He gives you free will, but he protects you. Those that he knows are going to come to him, I think he surrounds you until that day that you say yes to him. And I wasn't even born yet, but God protected my father to keep him in 13 crash landings to never kill himself. And the one that the fire was coming in sideways and literally had to go what they call side slipping until he got right to the ground, turned forward and landed and quickly got out of the plane. The other time he told me he landed in a insane asylum and a mental ward, and there was mechanical problems, and all these fellows that were insane, mentally impaired came out, and they were all of a sudden pilot AP mechanics. And they were all over his plane. He was doing everything he could to keep him from trying to, quote, fix his plane. Finally, when he did get it fixed, he was in a cornfield. It was in the cornfield behind their building, and they tried to cut out the corn as much as they could so he could take off. And he finally did take off. And when he got up in the air, he said corn stalks were hanging off the sides of his wings. So he had lots of experiences. His mother, my grandmother, who passed away in our home in Texas, she was a godly woman. Not like I was particularly when I was a little kid, to say the least, but I remember she was just a little woman, but she loved Jesus. I remember my mother, when we went upstairs to call her for breakfast, the door was shut, and my mother said, well, don't bother her, she's praying. And when her door is shut, she's praying, just leave her alone. And so we ate breakfast. And then a few hours later, of course, it was time for lunch. Came down for lunch, and Margaret came in for lunch, and Mom said, go up and get Grandma. Tell her it's time for lunch. And I went scampering upstairs and started to get Grandma, but her door was still shut. And as a young kid, I never will forget that. I thought, wow, can anybody pray that long? She was praying all morning into even past lunchtime. And she was praying for her son, my father, and she was praying for me. And God hears prayers. So the Lord answered her prayer for sure. But anyhow, back to Milwaukee, Wisconsin. We, like I said, grew up in kind of a middle-class home. My brother and sister like to tell this story on me. My brother's 6 years older than me. My sister's 8 years older. So I was really fairly separated from them until I got much older, of course. And then we've been close ever since. But they'll always tell this story on me when I was, I guess, about 2 years old, and mother had me kind of on a clothesline like a little doggy out in the backyard when she went in the house to get something. And somehow I had this little harness on me and I was able evidently to pull it off, they said. And I ran down, was running down to the end of the block. And Mom came right back out and she couldn't believe where I was. And they looked around the yard, looked back in the house, yard, he couldn't find me. Pretty soon they started going down the block, other places. And I guess they saw me at the end of the street sitting on a fire hydrant. And I hadn't had any of my clothes on, I guess, at that point. She was going to change my clothes or something. And she just went in to get them or something, I guess. In effect, I was in the water or something. Anyhow, long story short, I was sitting there naked on top of a fire hydrant, they said, waving at all the cars as they went by. So that's kind of about all I remember. And I probably remember that more from them telling me that story when I was in Milwaukee. But at 4 years old, we moved to Texas. And I do remember being there. We moved to Houston, Texas, and my daddy then got into the oil business for himself. He, like I said, flew for Pure Oil, and evidently he had saved up enough money to, I think he had some other partners where they bought a oil well and then one or two more. And but we were only in Houston for about a year, and then moved when I was about 6 years old, 5 or 6 at least, to Olden, Texas. Olden is kind of right in the center of Texas, about 150 miles west of Dallas. And it was a little town. If you blinked, you'd go through it and never know it. It didn't have any stoplights. It didn't have even a stop sign. One little 2-lane road, a little rural road. I think the little sign, as I recall, maybe said 300 people in the whole town. And there may have been more further out. It was, like I said, primarily rural. And my dad moved out there moved our family there because some of his oil wells were in that part of Texas. And so he was, so when we moved there, he bought a home in this little kind of rural town. The little town only had one little post office about the size of a bedroom, had a little grocery store about the size of a 7-Eleven, a real old looking little building, real small as a little house. It had an old deserted filling station, which my dad actually bought that and put drip gas in it for our own cars, and 3 little churches, and then just a few scattered homes in this kind of poor little town out near where my daddy's oil wells were, so where he could work on them. Remember the little church that we went to there was a Methodist church. It had about, I'd say 20 people, maybe. In Good Sunday, it might have had 30. And it was more like a house church, but it was in a little building. And we had practice preachers that came in. And even as a little kid, being 6, 7, 8, 9 years old, I can remember very distinctly the different practice preachers. There'd be some preachers that would come in there, and I would kind of like them. They'd be nice. They'd talk about the weather and the birds and the bees and fun and nice things or nice Bible stories. But then there would be others that would come in that were kind of practice preachers, and I wouldn't like them very much. They would talk about things that made me feel convicted, and it was very interesting as a little kid how the difference was so obvious. Finally, there was one fellow that came in, kind of a practice preacher. He was a real tall guy. He was kind of intimidating. He was so tall. I think he was close to 7 feet tall. I remember he wore a size 14 shoe. He must have been a basketball player or something. But he had a message. He talked about heaven. He talked about hell. And I remember at the end of his, I was so convicted. I mean, I was scared. I didn't want to go to hell. I know that. And as a little, I think I was about 9 years old at that point. And I remember he had a little altar call, and there was only about, again, 25, 30 people there that Sunday night. And as I was, and we sang a little hymn at the end, and we all kind of held our little hymnals. And I was saying to myself, inside us, he had kind of what they have, a little altar call. If you want to receive Jesus Christ in your own life here and now, just come forward. Well, it was only about 20, 30 feet forward. It's a real small little church. And I wasn't on the edge of the aisle. I was, my family was on one side, and I don't know who was on the other side. But I thought, for sure, I'm not going to go forward. I just still remember to this day distinctly holding that hymn book, kind of like, if I don't let go of the hymn book, I won't go forward. So there was a real struggle going inside, just an enormous struggle. And it's almost as if, as I remember back, is almost as if as an out-of-body experience. And I let go of that hymnal and started walking forward, just against, in a sense, against my own will, but not the will of God and the Holy Spirit that was just drawing me. His drawing was more powerful than my fear of what other people would think. And I went forward, and I don't remember much that night. I presume I professed to receive Jesus there that night. And I do remember being home uh, later that night, and having a sense of peace, and my mother even talking to me. And I still remember laying on the bed that night, a peace that I didn't have before. However, I didn't really follow the Lord. I didn't have any particular follow-up, so I didn't really have assurance of salvation. And so consequently, I can't say for sure if I was saved then. But I think I may have been, and for sure the Lord was looking out for my life. But before we leave Texas, I want to tell you a little bit about the culture and how the world has changed, and how God used this in my life, even back in Texas. These people were, it was like a different world than it is today. Our house, the first house we bought, that my dad bought for our family there in little Olden, Texas, we were at a town about 10, 20 miles away, maybe even a little further than that. And while we were gone, the whole family was out of the house except for my grandmother. And she was upstairs and sleeping. And this was a petrified wood. The whole house was petrified wood, which is a stone. It's as hard as stone. It is a stone. It's petrified wood. And the whole house was made out of this. There was a lot of evidently petrified wood there, and it was made out of this. And the phone lines that go into the house, a neighbor, and the houses weren't close together. It wasn't like a tight city. They were an acre or so away. But somehow one of the neighbors happened to see the phone lines. It was a 40-mile-an-hour wind, big winds that day. And the phone lines going into the house were sparking. And the neighbor, the equivalent of probably 50 yards away, half a football field, or at least an acre, looked and could notice that, and went into their house, and they called our house to tell them, to warn them about these phone lines that looked like they were sparking right at the edge of the house there where they were coming into the house. Or it wasn't just phone lines, it was probably the electrical wiring for the house. And as I said, my grandmother was on the top floor, sound asleep, taking a nap, when the phone rang, and it woke her up. She got up, she went to the phone, picked it up, and said, "Hello." And right at that point, the phone lines, where the telephone wires, they were evidently all together, they had burned and disconnected the phone. So she couldn't hear anybody at the other end. It was like it was dead. She said, "Hello, hello." She heard nobody. She put the phone back down, went back and sat down, and at that moment, she looked up, I guess, in the corner, and she saw some smoke. She saw where the house was on fire. And had the neighbor not seen it at that moment and called her literally in that second, if the neighbor would have waited just a couple of seconds to call, my grandmother, my father's mother, probably would have burned up and passed away at that time. But she was a godly woman, as I said, and God preserved her, God protected her. They saw that. The long story short, she went out. The winds were so strong. The fire department they didn't have any fire department in that town, as I told you. Just had a little teeny post office the size of a bedroom and a grocery store about the size of a small little house. And that was it in the town. So someone called the fire department, but by the time they got there, the whole house literally had burned down. It was like an oven inside, because the petrified wood made it like insulated it, so it got extremely hot inside and melted, just literally melted everything in the house. And we lost everything, all our clothes, money that Dad had in the house, just everything. Pictures, that they were most disappointed at losing all the pictures. But anyhow, long story short, we got there. I think somebody called our family wherever we were out of town, 20 miles away or so, raced there. And I remember seeing, just as the house was, the final bit was collapsing and just totally coming down and up in flames. Fire department got there after us, actually, but it was a little late. So there we were, on the street. Our family, we had nothing but the automobile that we were in and the clothes on our back. Well, the postmaster, one woman, in the post office, she had a little house next to it, and she immediately took us in, said, "You all stay with me." And it was a little tight there because I think it was only a one-bedroom house, so I don't know if we all slept in the living room or what, but we stayed there because Daddy's business was there, and he was going to try to buy another house and what have you. But here's the interesting thing. Immediately, the postmaster lady, I used to call her Mall Tea Kettle. I don't remember what her real name was. Anyhow, one night when we were there, she said, she took our family, took us by the hand and said, "Follow me." There was a grade school, middle school, and high school, basically all in one building. In fact, when I was in grade school, there was two of the grades were always together. First and second were together. Third and fourth were together. Fifth and sixth were together. And then there was kind of a middle school, or junior high as they called it then, and the high school, all in one building. My brother and sister, I think one of them had two graduating in their class, and another one had one or two or three graduating in their class. So it was a very small school, to say the least. Anyhow, it did have a gymnasium, and basketball was big. And so she was walking us a couple blocks away to where, kind of down the dirt road, to where the basketball practice was. And they had a stage there, and they had some bleachers in this little basketball gymnasium. And as we got there, it was dark, and she knew where the light switch was. Everybody did. And of course, the doors was open. They didn't lock doors in Holden, Texas in those days, and I probably still don't for that matter. Small little town. So she knew right where the light was. We walked in, flicked on the light, and on the stage was the entire city. I think all 300 people that were on the stage, or on the bleachers. And we saw them, and we were surprised and shocked. And then they opened the curtain on the other side of the court, and it was full of everything that we needed to move into the new house that my daddy had gotten. It had ovens, stoves, refrigerators, sofas. It even had clothes. I mean, they had everything. The town folks literally bought everything for us to refurbish and to go into our new home. Totally a surprise to us. You know, and I just share this with you to realize what society was like then. This was back in the 50s, and how God was working in our country with a Christian culture, even though not everybody was Christian or born again, but it still had a lot of this Christian character. Now, in the bigger cities, even in the 50s, it wasn't this way. But in rural Texas and in many rural cities, some of you maybe have never experienced this, being in a place like that. I mean, neighbors, they watched out for one another. Us kids couldn't get away with anything if we tried. The little town folks, we all knew it. We were all like one big family, and they took care of us. In fact, it was so, people were so honest and all that my daddy, he had two or three vehicles for the family. One for him, one for mom, and I think even my older sister was driving then. And we never, I remember this, didn't think anything of it at the time, never took the key out of the car. Left the key in, you'd turn off the engine and leave the key in, the car would be unlocked, the key would be in the switch. Anybody could get in, drive it off. Never did that. In fact, they didn't even, when they sold the house, they didn't even have a key to the house. They never, ever locked the house. It was a different world then. In fact, when we were out of town on a little vacation, we were supposed to be gone, I think, a week, and my dad ended up coming back a little early because of something I can't remember. But while we were out of town, when we got back a day or two early, it was late at night, and I remember we started to go into the house, And as we went, just opened the door and went in, started to go up to the bedroom to get in the bedrooms, the different bedrooms where we slept. Opened the door and there was strangers in our beds, in all of our beds. Well, and I remembered it didn't seem alarming at all to me at the time, because it wasn't my folks, didn't think anything of it. We all just tiptoed back down. Mom and Dad said, be real quiet. We don't want to wake the folks up, whoever these folks are. They went back down, went out the front door, walked just a little ways down the dirt road to our neighbor's house, which was an older lady, a widower, lived all by herself, and she had 2 bedrooms, a little living room, kitchen, little sun porch, and it was midnight, I think. Then it was pretty late at night, and we walked in there. They said, "Don't wake her up. We'll just spend the night here." So we, again, as a little kid at that point in time, 8 or 9 years old, I didn't think a lot of it, but it's just kind of par for the course. Mom and Dad went into the spare bedroom, and us kids slept in the living room. And I remember waking up the next morning when the lady was in the kitchen fixing all of us breakfast. When we all got up and we had breakfast, and she said, "Oh, I'm so glad you guys were here." And they said, "Well, we came back early on our trip, and we went in the house. There was strangers in there." And she said, "Oh, yes. Well, we didn't think you were going to be back this soon. And the Joneses, or whatever their name was, I don't remember their names, they had other company, and they didn't have room in their house. And they knew you guys were gone and wouldn't mind them staying in your house." And they said, "No, it didn't bother us at all." And that was fine. And so, in fact, we had breakfast real early, because she was an older lady, got up, I think, at 6 o'clock or something. We had breakfast at 6 that morning. And so we went over. The people next door in our house were still asleep. And we went over, and my mom fixed them breakfast. So when they woke up, we had breakfast for them. And that was the life. That's what I grew up in. I grew up in an environment where it was like another world compared to today. And I wish more people could experience that and realize the Christian character. Everybody went to church. Not everybody were believers, for sure. But it was just everybody in the town, or at least most everybody, certainly the vast majority, all went to church. And as I said, there was 3 churches. Our little Methodist church was probably the smallest where we went. And then there was I think a Church of Christ, and I think that was a little larger. Then there was a Baptist church, and it was much larger. It was the largest of the 3 little churches in town. And everybody went to one of those 3 churches, and that made up most of the town folks. And that affected everything in the town. Well, anyhow, growing up in Texas was pretty neat. In fact, I've still gotten to the point where probably shouldn't say this publicly, but I've had a lot of homes over the years, and I usually never lock the doors when we're gone, and even in cities. But the Lord's, not saying that's always the smartest, but the Lord's took care of us. And I've always figured if somebody wanted to break in knowing we weren't there, this way they don't have to break the door down. They can just open it up. But they may be surprised, so I wouldn't recommend that. Anyhow, that was my life growing up, and that's maybe when I came to know Christ as a young boy. But it wasn't long before my dad realized that it might be better for the family to get in a more civilized area, bigger town. Plus, he had an opportunity to buy a large music store and a gift store, kind of a department store, 2 stories in Colorado Springs. And so we ended up moving to Colorado Springs. And I was 10 years old when we moved to Colorado Springs. And I used to help my dad a lot in the store when I wasn't in school and what have you. And God wasn't really getting a hold of my life particularly. Like I said, I wasn't even sure if I was saved. I wasn't thinking a lot about it, to be honest. But my mom, we went to church in Colorado Springs, went to the Methodist church for a while, but found out that fellow, the preacher, he didn't know Jesus Christ from a bale of hay. He was certainly somebody that didn't believe it really in the Bible or the resurrection. And my mom and dad had enough spiritual understanding. They knew that wasn't right, even though it was a big Methodist church. Then we went to Presbyterian church, First Presbyterian down in Colorado Springs, which was more of an evangelical and truly genuine believers there. And went there for a period of time, and then went to a Baptist church after that for a period of time, and then went to Assembly Brethren church after that. So I was Methodist, Presbyterian, Baptist, and Brethren. So I've been to all of them as I was growing up, and the last one especially emphasized looking to the Bible, and especially reading the scriptures. However, when we moved to Colorado Springs, I was just getting out of grade school, and that was when I spent my middle years in what would be called middle school. We called it junior high then. And God certainly was not leading my life. I guess I wasn't the worst guy around. I wasn't in particularly a gang or anything, but I wasn't particularly honest before I was 16. When I was still 15, my dad had a number of vehicles then in the store and was doing okay. So he would keep some parked in the front of the house and some in the back. And so if one of the vehicles was gone, it wasn't in the front, it was always assumed it was in the back, or vice versa. If Dad or Mom or Bill or my brother or sister, any one of them came out to get a vehicle. So it was pretty easy for me at times there in ninth grade. And it was pretty cool. I was in ninth grade, and I would sneak out one of my dad's cars and drive it, take off, have a date, and pick up my best buddy and double date. And so I did this at times, and fortunately I was always kind of in the lookout for police, because I would have been I knew I'd be in trouble if I ever got stopped. My brother one time realized I did sneak the car out instead of coming and getting me. I guess he followed me, and it was an ice rink at Broadmoor Hotel. My friend and I were double dating, and we went in there ice skating. And my brother, he went out to the car. He saw the car in the parking lot, and he pulled the plug out of it so the car wouldn't start. And I guess he kind of left it on top, so it wasn't real noticeable it was out. But I certainly wasn't a mechanic, not at 15 anyhow, still not really. But anyhow, I came out with my girlfriend, or that I was dating at least at that point, and my buddy and his. And we got in the car to take off, and it wouldn't start. Kept turning over, trying to start it. Never would start. And I thought, oh, this is not good. And so then I finally called one of my buddies who was 16, who had a car. And he came all the way up to the Broadmoor where we were, which is west of Colorado Springs. And he started pushing us. Well, that started denting in the back of this it was a little Morris Minor, and it started affecting the bumper and of the car. Now I knew that's definitely not good. So then finally we got around and we started pulling it and towing it. I'd never been in a towing situation before, but we towed it all the way back to my house, which was, well, it was at least 10 miles away or more, and parked it that night. And I just left it there, snuck back in the house. And of course, my brother knew what he had done. He was surprised I was able to get it back. He was expecting me to call and confess that what I had done and have to open up, but I didn't do it. I was so determined to hide what I did. And of course, they later clearly found out when they saw, oh, what happened to the back of the bumper of the Morris Minor? And I was the one that was caught with that. So that kind of shook me up, to say the least. I can't really remember what my dad did, but I knew that was not good. I remember one night I snuck out. I think he had a Cadillac even, and it was again before I had my driver's license. And again, when I was just going into high school, which must have been right before I got my driver's license. And in high school, I had three things. I was interested in girls, sports, and being popular. That was it. I confess, it was girls, sports, and popular. So anyhow, I had this girl, and I was taking her up on the bluffs and to park with her. And God had really protected my life morally, even though I was not totally an innocent sort of guy. Used to make out some, to say the least, but God kept me from going all the way, fortunately, at that time in my life, and the Lord was watching out for me. But the Lord may have known this may have been a bad night for me from a moral standpoint, because if I was going to go to the top of this place with a girl and park, and obviously we would have done had a nice little makeout, to say the least. And on the way there, I slipped on some ice. It went off the side of the road, and it I think broke the axle. There was no way it could be moved. I had to tell my dad. Somehow I got my girlfriend home, and I walked all the way back home. I never will forget standing in the back door. Before I walked in the house, I thought, oh boy, my dad's going to kill me. I really had a good father, but certainly I didn't want to. A good father doesn't mean they're going to give you candy when you do wrong. That's for sure. And more than once, my dad and mom had given me good spankings when I was younger, but now I was older and I wasn't sure quite what was going to happen, but I just had kind of the fear of God in me. And I still remember thinking, I'm going to face my dad in just a second. And it was dark at night before the door opened, just looking at it. Anyhow, long story short, as I go through these different things in my own life, I realize how God was protecting me even that night from letting me be with this gal, which probably wouldn't have been the best girl to be with on top of the mountain. So the Lord in his mercy really kept me even safe in many ways. When I was in high school, though, I had I knew that I knew about God and Jesus Christ, but I wasn't certainly following him. And but my mom wanted me to go to this Christian camp, and I thought, oh no, I don't want to go to a Christian camp. That's the last place in the world. I'm sure it'll just be a bunch of little ugly girls, and nobody popular will be there. And I was just, I was just into myself, insecure, little high school kid, and wanting attention, wanting popularity, and whatever's cool is cool, whatever isn't. And going to a little Christian camp, that is not cool. But my mom virtually forced me to go to this thing, and I thought, I was not wanting to go. Long story short, when I got there, it was a small camp, and sure enough, it wasn't one of these. I mean, there are some Christian camps that are really, really super. They're really run well, and they're just the activities are fantastic. But this was just a nice little church camp, and but lo and behold, I went to Lawson High School in Colorado Springs, and the other major high school there was called Palmer. And the head cheerleader, who was a junior at Palmer High School, and I knew of her, she was there at this camp. I thought, my goodness, what is a good-looking girl cheerleader, the popular cheerleader at the high school here at a camp? Why did she get lost or something? And all of a sudden I thought, hey, this camp is looking up. Trying to check my time. I thought to myself, hey, this camp may be pretty cool. And so all of a sudden, I kind of tried to be around where she was, and it was kind of, again, it wasn't really a good type of camp, because they didn't know how to really work with kids real good, and a lot of the kids were just kind of pairing up and weren't focused too much on Christianity, and so I'd kind of been with this girl. Her name was Carol, and I'd seen her and talked to her some, and kind of got to know her a little bit. And I don't remember exactly how it worked, but I think one of the guys said, hey, I think Carol kind of likes you, Jim. Wow. I was kind of trying to flirt with her, I guess you might say, a little bit, but I didn't think she'd ever go for me. My goodness, little old me. She's the coolest in Colorado Springs, in the whole city of Colorado Springs, and neat personality, good looking, here at this Christian camp, and that's all I needed, though. She might be interested in me. So long story short, I tried to kind of connect with her more and more. And we did connect. And so she was kind of my little, girlfriend, if you want to call it that, at the camp. And we got to know each other, and we'd sit together watching the movie or whatever at times and stuff. But I knew my weak spot, as I found out as I got to know her. She was really a Christian. She was a real Christian, and she and she really loved Jesus, and she knew Jesus. And I thought, wow, that's kind of interesting. And I was a little surprised, but I felt, I felt I could kind of win her with maybe my personality or whatever. I'll do the best I can. But I felt my weak spot was Christianity, and I thought, I think she sees through me that I'm not much of a Christian at all, or at least not a very good one if I'm a Christian, and she that would probably hurt her to really like me. And I wanted to do anything I could do to make Carol like me. So I knew what good Christians do, Christians that are really on fire, as they used to say, or even say today, on fire for Christ. They witness to other people. And I knew the words. I'd gone to church, and I kind of understood the vocabulary, and I knew what the thing was. And so I thought, this is my weak area. I've got to make sure Carol knows I'm a good Christian, and that'll help my relationship with her. My total motivation was that. And so we were out walking one day, kind of down the trail road, a little dirt road from the camp. And I said to Carol, there was one guy in the camp that everybody kind of knew. He's kind of the black sheep. This was a small camp. I don't think there was more than, I don't know, 50 people. I don't remember exactly. But there wasn't a lot of kids there. It was a small group, about 50 maybe. And this one fella kind of stood out. I don't know what he had done, but we knew he was kind of known for not being a Christian, and obviously for some things, whatever he'd done. So I thought to Carol, I thought, well, here's how I'll really shore up the thing that I'm sure I'm missing with her, to have her think I'm a good Christian. I said to her, Carol, we should witness to this Eddie sometime. That was his name, Eddie, as I recall. And I remember walking along, and she looked at me kind of like surprised. I thought, I've connected. Pay dirt. And she looked at me. She said, oh yeah, Jim, that would be great. That would be great that you'd like to do that. And I thought, good. I've kind of got, now she knows I'm a great Christian, because I said, we should witness to this Eddie fella. So I thought, good, making points here now, and I think I'll really get closer with her. And we continued to walk a little bit and talking about some other things after that. And lo and behold, down at the other end of the trail, a little dirt road, not long after I had said we should witness to this Eddie fella, guess who started to come right towards us by himself? Yes, it was Eddie. Here comes Eddie coming down the trail right towards us. And I got gulp. I thought, oh no, Lord, what have I gotten myself into? And I can just still remember to this day. I thought of I knew immediately. Boy, my mind triggered. I got one of three options. I can either run, don't say anything, just turn around and run. Get out of there. Just take off and make up some excuse later. What happened? So that was one thing. That was clicking in my mind, thinking that may be the best option, because the other two didn't seem very good. The other two would be to just on the spot say, hey, Carol, I have to confess something. I really didn't want to witness to Eddie. In fact, I don't even know I don't know how to witness. I've never witnessed anybody in my life, and I just have to confess I was just lying to you to get you, and just to confess to her. And I thought, I don't like that option at all either. I thought the third option, and this didn't seem very good either, was, well, let's just go along, and when we meet him, maybe he'll need to keep going and do something else, so we won't be put in a spot where we'll need to so-called witness to him. Because she said, hey, here he is. He's coming down the trail. Maybe we can witness to him. And so I thought, oh, hopefully I'm going to take my chances on this third option. Third option being Eddie, he's going somewhere and he can't stop and talk. So we finally met up with Eddie, and he stopped. He didn't look too much in a hurry. So I said, hi, Eddie, how you doing? And I knew Carol was kind of waiting on me to initiate maybe some things. And he said, fine. And I said, where are you going? You heading back to the camp? And thinking he'd say, oh yeah, I'm heading back there. And he'd say, no, just walking around, not doing anything. And I thought, oh no, that's the worst thing to have happen. Walking around, not doing anything. Lord, please. And so I just was just starting to perspire at that moment. I said, I was stuck. I didn't run. I didn't confess to Carol. And so I thought, the next thing I said, well, if you want to walk along with us, you're welcome. So he said, sure. Thought, oh no. So anyhow, we started walking. We walked down the trail a while. And finally, we said, I don't know if Carol said it or I said it, but we kind of went off the trail and sat down on a log up there, the three of us. And we were still talking for a while. And the whole time, I was just sweating bullets. I thought, oh man, this is a nightmare. And I knew Carol was kind of waiting on me because I had said we should witness to Eddie. And she thought I knew how to witness. And I didn't even know what witnessing was particularly. But I had been in Sunday school some. I had learned one verse, John 3:16. For God so loved the world, he gave his only begotten son. So after a while, I said, I forgot exactly how I started, but I said, Eddie, have you heard this verse or something to that effect? He said, what's that? And I said, and I just started quoting it. For God so loved the world, he gave his only begotten son, that whoever believes in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. And he said, oh, that's interesting. I said, yeah. And then I said, yeah, here it is again. For God so loved the world, he gave his only begotten son, that whoever believes in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. And I didn't know what else to say. And I was kind of him on around. And then Carol, thankfully, she said something. And she started talking and kind of sharing her testimony, actually, with him, how she came to know Christ and sharing the gospel. And I was so relieved, that I didn't have to say anymore. But after a while, it became obvious that I wasn't saying anything. And I thought, Carol's not going to think I'm a good witness, or I need to say a little bit more so Carol doesn't wonder about me. So she was talking for a while, and then I finally said, yeah, and Eddie, John 3:16, God so loves the world that he gave his only begotten son, that whoever believes in him will not perish, but have everlasting life. And this time Carol had shared some things. And this time when I shared that, it's like somehow God just spoke to him with that verse. And his eyes kind of started watering up a little bit. And long story short, there we were. And this whole time I was just burning up inside. And I don't know if she maybe asked him if you'd like to receive Jesus as your Savior right here and right now. And he said, yeah, can I do it alone right here? And I said, yes, you can. And come on, Carol, and we'll wait for you down here, Eddie. And we walked down just a little ways, and we sat on a big rock. And Carol said, we should pray for him. I said, yeah, we should pray for him. And she started praying. And I remember so clear that moment while Carol was praying for Eddie, who Eddie was up there praying alone to receive Jesus Christ. And I was sitting there. I still remember that aspen tree right in front of me. And as I was looking at it, and I was thinking, here, I told Eddie how to get out of hell and how to go to heaven. And I prayed right at that moment to God. I said, God, I don't even know for sure if I'm coming to heaven or going to hell. I knew years ago I had professed and maybe received Jesus, but I didn't have any follow-up. I didn't have any assurance at that point in my life, and said to God, I told him how to get out of hell and to go to heaven, and I'm not sure where I'm going. And I said, if I'm not going to heaven, if I've not received you before, I want to receive you right now. I said this prayer quietly. I didn't say it out loud. I was still concerned what Carol thought, but I was also concerned about not going to hell and going to heaven. And I prayed right then, if I don't know you, if I've not received you, I want to receive you now. And I know at that moment, whether I was ever saved before or not, I know at that moment I was saved. Long story short, Eddie got saved. He received Christ into his life. Continued to have a nice time with Carol while the camp was on. And after the camp was over, I lied to her to get her to like me. I told her I was older than what I was. I was 2 years younger than her. And God used my sin really to capture me, to trap me. I sinned about my age. I sinned about wanting to witness. and the Lord put me with this girl, and that I thought was really cool. And so God, in a sense, really trapped me in my own deception and my own sin to actually bring me to himself. And from that day to this day, I know that I've been saved. And then my life started changing. Now, God was in my life. Jesus was in my life. It wasn't just a nice little kid selling juice harps when I was in grade school, or playing little games, or even just dating and stealing, taking the car out at night when my dad didn't know about it. I mean, I didn't all of a sudden become a perfect kid, but something changed at that point. The follow-up, the transformation, and what began to happen. The good, the bad, and the ugly, all sorts of things. Now a war started to take place in me and through me. In my high school, things began to be totally different. What happened to me and what I began to do in high school and then in college. And you're going to hear next week, I think, started to call this little section Radical Christian, because God revolutionized my life from that day. Leading Eddie to the Lord, God led me to himself. Guys, you've got a testimony. You share, because God will use your testimony with people every time you share it as well. Lord bless you guys. I love you. I'll see you tomorrow. Questions? Any questions you have? I'm glad to. Well, let me just quickly mention a couple of comments. Dale from Glen Burnie, Maryland. Thank you for being willing to open up and tell your story. I'm looking forward to the next several Thursdays. Well, thanks, Brother Glenn. Larry, sweet. These are sweet things to hear. Appreciate you sharing, Larry says. Jack, Mike, Sue, you guys, no questions, just sharing my story. But I tell you, the story dramatically changes at this point. I became literally a different person. I mean, a different person. And you will hear what happened in high school, then college. Love you guys. Lord bless you. See you tomorrow with any questions on my testimony, on family, on church, or on the nation. Get in your questions. I'm going to be talking your questions. You're going to be your show tomorrow. You can ask me anything about anything, and we'll talk. You can come on the air with me, or just text it in, whatever you want to do, and we'll do it. So God bless you guys. Love you. See you tomorrow, 4 p.m. Eastern Time. Lord bless.